Hello and welcome back. We are now joined with Mark and Jess, so from Salford University and Code, who are a digital agency, and they're going to be talking to us all about the world of user experience. So I'm going to hand over to you guys.
Okay, right. It's Jess's kind of forum more than mine. I'd just like to put a little bit of background to why we're doing this today and the kind of journey that Jess took and what we're all about. So, yeah, I'm Mark Scargill. I'm a lecturer at the University of Salford. Jess graduated in 2013, yeah, and has escalated to the role that she's actually in now, yeah, which is head of user experience design at a place called Computerlove. What we want to be emphasizing really is that you guys might be thinking that digital, is that all about programming? Is it all about coding? Well, no, it's not, because these roles in user experience design have really become defined over the past 5 years. Yeah. If you guys think about what you do and what you use on a daily basis, yeah, you're looking at a screen now. You're looking at myself. You're looking at Jess. We're looking at you. Okay. Undoubtedly, all of you guys have a mobile phone. Right. So we're aware of the tech and we're aware of these things and how they actually function. But what lays behind them is an architecture, yeah, and a way of working that is more than just technical. It is also to do with architectural flow and kind of usability and testability. Things just don't happen. The classic phrase is, and I'll say it one more time, Jess, good design should be invisible, but it isn't just about the tech. And indeed, when Jess starts talking about her presentation, she'll talk about how she's witnessed a change. And in some ways, if I dare say it, has actually defined the role of UX as well. So what we intend to do, guys, is I've done an introduction there. I'll leave it to Jess because she's a lot more interesting than I am. She's got a presentation that she's worked on, and I've looked through it as well, which is great. So we intend Jess to take you through her journey, and then towards the end, okay, what we'll actually do is we'll have a Q&A session, yeah, for about 10 minutes. And please do not be shy, all right? What we always say is the only question that is the wrong question is the question that is never asked. Okay, so I'm Mark Scargill, Salford University. Okay, and now we're going to go over to Jess. Jess?
No worries, I'm going to try and share my screen now, so let's hope that all that works. Let me know if it's all working for you. Yeah, I can see it, so hoping everybody else can too. So what I'm going to start is like, what is user experience? And as Mark said, just how it's developed over time and how that's actually worked for me has changed a lot throughout my career. So just to kind of give you a little bit of an intro to me. So I'm Jess, I'm head of UX at Code, which means that I get involved in all things that are kind of talking to users, talking to kind of the different people within different teams and making sure that they're using kind of user insight in the way that they make their decisions around what they're going to make next and what they're going to build next and what they're going to design next. So it's a lot of me kind of saying, being a big advocate for any user out there and making sure that we've got them in the center of every decision that we kind of make. So this has been my journey so far, which is kind of a weird one, but I started out trying to decide what it is that I wanted to do, and I'll take you through that journey. And then I went to Salford University, where I learned a hell of a lot about design, and then moved into BJL, which was an advertising agency. And then once I'd done a couple of years there, I then moved into Sigma, and then finally ended up where I am now at Code. So the first question that I felt like I was constantly asked as I was in kind of school or college or anywhere else was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And in all honesty, I had no idea. So these were my two kind of goals. On the left side, there was that kind of being a lawyer. Do I want to go out there and argue for things that are important for me and get that kind of message across? Or just do I go down the complete creative route of wanting to be a wedding designer and design really beautiful dresses out there. And I just didn't really know what to pick as a future for myself. So when I went to college, I started out by picking courses that could take me down either one of them routes. So I did law and psychology, thinking really in that lawyer kind of mindset thing. And then I did media and art. And as part of that journey, I realized that I had to drop the art because I just couldn't keep focusing on my studies if I was trying to put so much time and effort into that art side. But what I really learned out of that journey in college was that I was really into the digital media, which was one that I hadn't expected. I'd taken it because it was something that I kind of liked and wasn't really leading me down this designer aspect, but was something that was cool. And that was really surprising for me because it got me to kind of really consider what I was doing to join at Salford University. I was like, well, I've enjoyed the law, I've enjoyed the psychology, but actually the digital media was really what got me excited about going into college every day. So I joined Salford University looking for a course that was like, okay, well, how can I do that design work then? What can I do to actually enjoy what I'm doing every day? And especially since I hated exams, I hated doing anything to do with exams. They really make me panic. So law and psychology just weren't the ones for me in that kind of decision making.
I think it's really important what you're talking about because the audience that we've got today, you'll be thinking about your future careers and what you want to be studying. Yeah. So one of the things that you've got to do is kind of analyze yourself as a user experience. Yeah. What am I about? What do I really want to do? And what do I really want to achieve? Because there are so many different kind of programs out there. And as Jesse's saying, I remember when Jess came for her interview, a lot of people who apply for media courses or arts-based or related programs think that they've got to be really good at drawing, and you don't. Yeah, it's more about a thought process and different. There's a big difference between art and design and what it actually requires. So in some ways, it kind of all joined up well, didn't it? Yeah,
oh, absolutely. It was something that I didn't really expect, and the psychology has actually helped me so much more now, and I didn't realize that then, but I followed the thing that I was passionate about, which was that digital media side, and that got me to actually engaging with you, Mark, and having that conversation about, well, what is it that I can do? Is there something here that I can keep being interested in and keep pushing myself forward?
Exactly. So you've got a mix of creative and what we call social-based skills. Psychology is a big part about user experience, a massive part, understanding people. When the journey really first started, people thought it was just about interfaces and devices, but then somebody went, oh, but people use these. And that's really, really important. Yeah. What are the motivators? What makes things work? What makes people want to use things? Anyway, Jess, carry on, lady.
Well, funny you should say that. So this is one of the big things that I went to this design course and was with a wonderful group of designers and found out that I wasn't actually that good at design. And that's not to say that that was a bad thing. It meant that I could really keep pushing myself, trying to learn fundamental design principles around how to create interfaces and apps and websites and all that kind of stuff. But what I really learned about myself at that point was that it wasn't about being good at design for me. It was about making sure that the systems made sense, that users could look at them and there was a consistent flow through things rather than just designing the most beautiful thing. It was like, well, how do we make this actually make sense?
I think that's a really important part of what you're dealing with and what you're talking about is that when you're designing an interactive, be it a web page, be it interactive, be it an app, any kind of interface, it's about understanding the architecture as much as and in tandem with the aesthetic, and how it actually looks. But the user journey is the all important kind of aspect. It's kind of, I akin it to architecture, like I say, a roadmap, a journey through. Anyway, Jess, sorry.
It's all right. You're very welcome to keep jumping in, making my points better than I can. But I think one of the things that I did want to say about that experience of being in university is lots of people think you turn up to a class. Lots of people think there's 130 people in a room and you've just got to listen, absorb, go away and make it your own. Well, actually, I think the way that Mark structured that course for me helped me so much in my work life. So it was all in 6-week cycles. So you'd start by going through the design process every single time. So you'd start with a bit of research, You'd then start coming up with ideas. You'd then put that out to your peers and get a lot of feedback about what that is that you're actually doing, and continue to improve things, and then pull that all together into a nice story at the end as a kind of presentation of everything that you've done. And I do think like just going through that process of like what's out there, what ideas have I got to solve them problems, and then actually coming back and sharing that with your peers is one of the greatest skills that we could have been taught.
I think you're right as well, and we had a unique opportunity with that program, Design for Digital Media. And like Jess said, the numbers were a lot smaller, and it was working together as a team. And interesting enough on that slide, now then, do not be put off, because the world of UX and UI is very, very kind of female dominated.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we've put that in deliberately, to get you thinking about it. But if you look at those people within there, I think it shows, a mixture of, different skill sets first and foremost. But what I've realized is that, the world of UX and the people that I know, like Leanne Dugan and people like Christine Charnock, and indeed people like Sophie Cheetham, who's also in that that photograph there. They were the ones who kind of pioneered and really went through the UX UI thing. Some of the guys did more kind of digital, kind of 3D based or gaming kind of design. But UX, I look around and I'm really proud of our alumni and the amount of young ladies that are actually really succeeding in that area. Okay.
And I think that was the key thing for all of us. We were a really diverse group of people actually, and what we were interested in. So some people were naturally designers, like Mark says. Some of them wanted to do 3D, and that was a skill set that I was pretty rubbish at. Others of them used to code, and I focused on like making systems work together. So I think what I actually learned was just follow what you're interested in, and stuff will work out. Like if you've got a passion for it, it exudes from you. People hear that in your voice and the way that you're talking about what you do. And this group of different ideas about how to fix things really helped me hone in what it was that I cared about.
What we used to do as well is we used to do individual projects, but also did a lot of team-based projects. Yeah. And if you look now at modern day kind of creative agencies, they're built up of not just one kind of person. Absolutely. Yeah, you can't have all the skills in the world. So what made it interesting was that we had a group dynamism. There was a cross section of different skills, but they all kind of conjoined and fluxed and came together to create really interesting, immersive and interactive experiences.
Absolutely.
Good.
So at that point in my life, this is what UX meant to me. So it was a job that allowed me to really think about the solution and its impact without losing that creativity and fun side. Like even if I couldn't design it, like Mark says, I could work with other people who could help me do that. And this was just something that got me really excited about. I could do a job in this. I can help people who can make beautiful things, make it make sense, and found kind of a spot in the world that really kind of worked for me. And I think the step that I took into my next kind of bit of the journey was because Mark set up a way of us to work with different agencies as part of being on the uni course. And I actually, as ridiculous as this sounds, I asked for my first job. I had got offered one somewhere else at the time, which was in a UX role as well. But what I'd learned about myself was that I really wanted to work in an agency to get the variety, working on lots of different things rather than working in one company and focusing on their one thing. I really wanted to work with an agency, and I'd had that opportunity as part of my university course. And I basically went to the people and said, look, I have a job that's been offered to me, but I'd really love to work for you guys. How could that work? Is that something that you'd be able to do? And I was fortunate enough that they said, yes, actually, we're in a position where we're taking on a new website and we need somebody with the skill set of bringing all that stuff together. So absolutely come on board and we can. I
think that at that point in time, like you say, you started off working off at an advertising agency.
Yeah.
And as we go through Jess's journey, UX, it wasn't really understood or defined what industry actually wanted itself. They used this term digital designer in trying to find out what it was. Now, the company that Jess started working at BJL, They did a lot of kind of corporate-based projects, and Provident was one of the projects that they actually did as well. Is that you got involved in that, and it needed somebody to overview all that was going on within it, with web being at the center of it. So this is why I say, and I think it's correct as a statement, is that Jess kind of started to define to companies maybe what they kind of really needed in a new designer. Not somebody who could do Photoshop or have creative ideas and produce scamps and all that stuff, but actually look at platforms. Okay, great.
Absolutely. And I think that was one of the things, like I'm talking about going back in time, responsive design, which is where you can have a website that to us seems insane that you wouldn't do this now, but where it scales from kind of big desktops all the way down to mobile. That was just becoming a thing. So UX wasn't even on people's radar at that point, really. I think NUX, which is another great group that I used to go to, they were on their second year. So it just was not being put out there in the industry. But I found it and found like, oh my God, this is something that just speaks to me. Like I'd say I can't be a great designer because I'm not the best at UI or whatever that might be. But actually, UX was a role that was developing in the industry, and it felt like something that was actually, it found me at the right moment of time, and I could come in and say, right, this is what we are going to design, and this is how it should work, and what journeys users should go on. And the first website I ever did was the Swinton Insurance site. It's very different than this now. But I learned so much from working with such great people who, as an advertising agency, had taken this on and really tried to push digital and welcomed me in as somebody who was going to try and push that too and develop that kind of role.
I think you're bang on, because if you look at the world, it's not overcomplicated what audiences want. They want things that they can access on devices, that they can actually get information from and interact and share with it. So I think at this point in time, it was the industry itself making that realization and transition to saying, look, we cannot do things like this anymore. Platforms and the way that people respond, the way that people interact and share content is so important.
Absolutely. And because it was developing at this point in time, this was actually a slide that I had to show internally to say, like, why is this valuable? Why are you talking about this UX thing? Like, and actually, this is more conversion now. Like, it's already split off into being another role, but at the time it was all bundled together into one, and it was about doing different tests and making the business money and how profitable it can be if you actually think about that user experience. So I was trying to show from best practice out in the field, like what research have other people done, because I couldn't get access to doing it myself, to kind of make that argument and say, actually, if we change the design to this company did better, so maybe that's going to work for us. And this is like the different kind of stages that I had to go to. So it's kind of a bit of a persuasion job as I was going along and saying, like, actually, this is why you should believe me. This is how much money this made for other people. And then the other one was just looking at people like absolute leaders in the field. Steve Jobs was probably never been called a UX designer, but is absolutely what he was doing. So he was all about understanding that human experience and how people do interact with different devices or different websites or for a different reason, and trying to really get to the bottom of, like, you'll only have good design if you understand how someone's going to use it in the first place.
Everybody loves a little bit of Steve Jobs, but even Apple, now, if you want to do a bit of research, they actually designed something that was so wrong, and it was a mouse.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? The rectangular mouse. Yeah, they didn't think about it. So even, you know, Apple, fantastic. They reinvented kind of user interface into this round circular kind of format. But even they, at some points in time, didn't absolutely get it perfect and spot on. Yeah, but great.
It's all about iterating and learning about what's working and what isn't working. And sometimes you have to put things in front of people to find out whether it will work. Not everything can come from an idea in a room and know whether that's actually going to happen. So I suppose when I was leaving that role and moving to my next one, I kind of thought again about, like, what is UX to me now? Like, how have I moved forward from what I knew at uni, and how have I actually taken that to develop myself further as well. So it was like, what is UX now? Well, it was a job role that allowed me to consider the website as a whole, and try to make it really consistent for users, and making sure that they weren't lost in any places as they were going through things. There was no dead ends. There was always something to continue your experience through. And for me, that was like, right, I really need to focus on how to keep that going from a best practice perspective. So like looking at lots of other people, seeing what they're doing. If there's a standard across the whole market, that's got to be the way that people expect to interact with this. So really trying to learn from others in that kind of bit of my role at that point. And I think I was there for about 2 years. Then I got a bit of a change in title. I became a UX consultant at a company called Sigma, which is now actually rebranded to Nexus. And this is where I learned everything about user research. It was fundamentally a user research agency, and they helped me so much to grow in just knowing how to talk to users, how to get information out of users by asking a different question, and really, really putting users at the center of things. So
I think the important thing there as well is that the term UX is actually using the term consultant. Yeah, we can talk to other people.
Yeah.
Okay, love it.
100%. And I think that's it. Like it changed because I stopped thinking about what's the market doing, and I started thinking about, well, finding out what are these users doing. So this is where my job split into two. And again, what a great experience. So I'd come with some of that best practice in the UX designer role. I'd learned a bit about information architecture, which is like the structure of your website. So how do all the pages sit together? What are they grouped into? All of that kind of stuff. I'd learned how to be better at design because I'd worked with lots of other professional designers. I'd learned the process of wireframing and actually prototyping and getting that in front of users and getting feedback. So don't make the perfect design the first time, you won't get it right. So pretty much like Mark said about Apple, nothing's perfect the first time around. It's all.
I think that's a really important thing, and there's been a big acceptance in the world of industry and also in education.
Yeah.
That you can learn a lot more by prototyping and trying things than trying to reach the goal of perfection.
Yeah.
The journey of discovery is so much more important. Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that, so on the user research side, we do a lot of user interviews, we do a lot of kind of user engagement, and how you behaved today in comparison to how you behaved over a year ago before we were all in lockdown is massively different. So even if it was perfect, it's not going to be anymore. People's needs have changed. The way that they think about things have changed. So it's about continually understanding that kind of user need and keeping that going. And that's really what I learned about being a UX researcher here. And you can do it with so many different, I've listed a load of methods there, but there's so many different methods that you can do to actually get that user feedback. But it'll be the best thing that you can do to kind of guide your decisions.
I think as well that what you've got there with the UX researcher, there's also, we've talked about UX as a definition and a role, which needed a definition, but is now something that has several kind of parts to it.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that Jesse's mentioning there is service design, because it's now gone from just being about devices, it's about understanding people who use it, and it's also now about understanding systems that lay behind that usability. Yes. Yeah, which is what service design actually is. So great.
The area of growth for me. So I went from that kind of best practice for the website, which is basically where I started, like how do we make that website work as good as it can? And really starting to think about, okay, well, what's the business process here? How is the business making that work, which is service design. So it's about understanding, like pairing the two bits together. So the business process and what they need to do to make money and how they're going to operate. And then also layering in, well, what's that customer going to do and how are they going to get through this journey? And what is it that, how are we going to marry them two up? That's pretty much, like there's a whole talk about service design as well anyway, but I think that's a new iteration on experience design. So it's already developing into another discipline itself. I ended up in it, I ended up doing it, and I'm still developing it here at Code as well. But it is one of the things that's kind of like, if you want to, you can always edge out into the next thing and keep pushing yourself to think broader and think about new things that are coming along. So at this point for me then, like what is UX? Well, it changed to really just understanding user needs. how that influences the way that they're going to behave with the things that you've designed, and then how they're actually going to affect, how that's going to affect what they do after they've interacted with your thing too. Like if you order a pair of shoes online, that's not where that ends. Your experience with, say, a brand that you've gone onto the website, you've ordered something, you've then got to get it in a delivery. It's got to come to your front door. Like that experience doesn't end just because they're not on your website anymore. And I think that's kind of the interesting thing that moved on for me. So like this still focused pretty much at this point on user needs and usability of a digital product, but I started to think about what's that bigger story.
Yeah, just think about online what you guys have experienced, and now it's about, it used to be seen as a bonus that you'd have like a tracking system how your order was actually being processed, and now it's seen as an essential part of that, of trust, that you can document where it's going. And one interesting thing as well is that you can have a product. So maybe you guys, wow, what have we used a lot of over the past 15 months? Deliveroo. Yeah, that kind of experience that you want that pizza, but if it arrives to you and that pizza is cold or it's late, yeah, it's taken the edge off that experience. But that is service design. So what happens in the background?
Yeah. Really? And that's kind of, I suppose, Sigma for me was probably more about that digital experience, which has been focused on the Deliveroo app. And now I'm in this world of actually looking at, in much more detail, that kind of service design as head of UX, and making sure that we're keeping that practice going, and not just thinking about the thing that we're making, but what's the role of the thing that we're making. And that's how my job's developed again. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit now about like code and its process, but it's a principle that I think from a UX perspective, you should always believe in anyway. And this is our kind of learn, build, measure, repeat. And it's all about insight and using that to make decisions, which is your strategy, and then making sure that that product delivers on it, and then using that to learn again. So it's a continuous cycle, and it's all about trying to meet that user need and balancing it with that business need and making sure that everybody wins. So everybody gets something out of it, but you're constantly improving because, as I said before, the world doesn't stop. The way that people interact doesn't stop. So you've got to keep improving all the time. Something can always change or be better or be innovated on.
I think one of the terms that has come out, and it's related to digital, isn't it, is the term beta or better. Is that things are always in a state of kind of improvement or development. And we've moved on now from where it used to be that people design things via assumption. And yeah, just look at the world around us and how it's changed. And as Jess has said, it's continually kind of developing and evolving in different ways. And as human beings, we've got to be not adverse to it, but kind of responsive to it. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the great things that this cycle has given me, is that fear that I used to have about being perfect and having the perfect solution and not wanting to share it with anybody. Actually, this has given me the opportunity to experiment and go, do you know what? I don't know the answer, but we'll try it and see. We'll see what happens out there. We'll see how users respond. We'll see what impact that has if we do change this banner or something else somewhere else. And it actually gives you that freedom to keep learning and continually understand whether things work, whether they don't work, what's right, what isn't. And that can be different for every single person you ever work with. You could be selling blinds one day and you could be selling cars another, and the different people and the different ways that they interact with things can change completely. So even though you learned it on one, that might not apply to another, but that's cool because you're getting to learn about it. So I kind of mentioned this earlier on, but this is the methods toolkit that we use at Code. So as you can see, there's loads of different stuff, and no one ever expects you to know everything in depth. It's basically a case of, right, I want to do a user interview, so you can work with experts like myself within the product teams, and we'll help you get there. So you can keep building on your knowledge, and if you start out as a junior, you'd basically be paired with someone like me, and we teach you and take you through it and learn by doing, because there's only one way to learn research, and I really do think it's about going through the process yourself and trying to make sense of what all of that stuff means. So how we're set up at Code, just so you get a kind of understanding of where I fit in an agency. We have what are called product teams. And what that means is we have completely different backgrounds. So a little bit like we were talking about when I'm at university. So you'll have somebody who's like a product owner, which is a little bit like a project manager if you've not heard that term before. We'll have developers, we'll have designers, we'll have people in there who are kind of data people, but that's where we sit around the outside. So UX consultants at Code, we are mobile. So we don't live in a team, but we help all of the team. So we come in and we make sure that the research is happening in the right kind of way. We're answering the questions that we need to. But it doesn't really stop there. So although I focus on user research as a UX consultant, I guess, we also have people who specialize in data. And that is amazing because I can hear something off one user that said, oh, I really didn't like the way that the postcode lookup worked or something like that. And I can go, cool, well, actually, can we validate that? Is there something that I can get from the data people who can say, oh yeah, people always drop off on this page, and really build that knowledge together and go, well, we might have only heard it from one person, but we can see on your website that's a really big problem. So it's all about working together to try and get to the bottom of why things are happening, so that and how big of a problem they are, so that we can start to keep improving and making them things so much better. I've got a quick few bit of methods that we use, but just to kind of give you the insight of what a research program might look like. So we do something called stakeholder interviews, and that's where we understand the business. We talk to them, we ask them about the process. And this is literally one live that I was in London speaking to somebody, I think about 2 years ago now. And she just talked about her role, how that worked, what it was that she did, how did that flow. And we walk around with Post-its and brown roll wherever I go. You'll spot me on a train. And that's just the general loop. You'll always know a UXer because they'll have Post-its and some brown roll wherever they go. I think it's just a natural kind of identifier for people like myself. But then we also do customer interviews. So just listening to the business process isn't really enough. You have to listen to it from the user themselves. What's the process that they go through? Because they don't just interact on your website. If you're looking for a car, you're not just going to go to Audi. You're going to look at all of them. What's the type of car I need? How am I going to decide which brand to choose and all of that kind of stuff? So we need to think broader than just the one business itself and their processes, but actually where's everybody else looking and what's important to them. And what we try and do with all of that information is then block that out into what we call an experience map. And that's where we take the key kind of stages that a user goes through, but then break that down into steps. And I'm not going to lie, they look linear, they're not. It's just a case of we know and acknowledge that people might do all of these things, and then really focus in on, well, what's the problems that people see at each stage? What are the problems that they come across? What can we solve for that user? But don't forget about the enablers. Like, what are the things that people really like? We don't want to lose that stuff. That stuff's working. We want to build on what we already know is good rather than just focusing on what the problems are. So this is like an artifact that we create that really talks about that to explain all of your research. And then once we've kind of mapped all of that out, it's like, right, well, where's the opportunities then? How are we going to fix this? And we tend to run something either like a content workshop or something we call as content mapping. And that's a whole other role in itself again, but really with a user-focused kind of perspective. So it's about like, what order should we tell people information? What's that journey look like? If we only talk about this here, how do we bring that back up later? Like, what's that kind of journey and what information should we show at what point and how are we going to sketch that out? And then obviously it goes into design, which this is really blurry actually, I apologize, but we design all of them pages up and take it into our lab. So at the moment we're doing it remote, but this is actually a picture of our lab in Code at the moment. And what it is a session. So if you've never heard of usability testing, we tend to speak to 5 users because you find 85% of your problems by speaking to 5 users anyway. So you can get a good bulk, otherwise you've got to speak to a high volume. And we aim to kind of talk to users from different kind of backgrounds, but still trying to achieve the same problem. So if we're looking at buying a car, I want to find somebody who's looking at buying a car. I want them to go use my thing because they're trying to find out all the information that they need to make that decision. So getting somebody in the right kind of mindset and asking them to do different tasks. So if you were looking for a car, how would you use this website to go about finding it? And then keep prompting them around like, well, what information are you looking for here? What do you like about this? What's not working for you? Like keep that going and observing where people struggle. Because I think one of the things to take out about usability testing is you can't trust users as much as I'm advocating for them. Whatever people say, we post-rationalize. We tell everybody what we think we want them to hear. Whereas actually watching somebody use your stuff, you can see how they interact. And they might tell you something completely different. They'll say, like, oh, yeah, that was really easy at the end of the session. But they completely struggled to get through the entire thing. So it's really important that you focus on what people are doing and not just what they're saying.
And what you're looking at here as well is you're looking for pain points, things that aren't working within things. So you guys, many years ago, I used to run a computer and video games program. And one of the things that was highlighted within that was the actual testability of games. And they got it wrong, because at that point in time, they used to actually design, build, and then test the game right at the end of the process, which was uneconomical, because there might have been faults with it that could have been identified a lot earlier on. That makes sense. So Jess has taken you through now, and again, this has been applied to the gaming industry and a lot of other design kind of thinking as well, animation, interactives, whatever, is that you do several stages of prototyping to find out the problems before you go to digital and it gets expensive and you've got to backtrack on your journey. So that's one of the big insights that came out of this process for me. And to me, it was amazing, because Jess has mentioned cars, but when people used to design cars, they didn't build a car and drive it. They designed it first, didn't they, and made models from it. So very much, it's a proven process that works and can save you a lot of time and a lot of energy and effort. Good. Absolutely.
And I think I'm talking a lot about websites because I happen to work in digital. I've also done usability testing on diabetes pens. So the same methods can be applied to pretty much any industry. If you need to just see how someone's going to use something, you can do that. You can get people into a room and ask them about it, make them feel really welcome, and then just get them to use it in front of you and see what they struggle with.
I think you're bang on there. And one of the other things that you've mentioned is, and the term that's coming up now is the idea of product. Is that we've moved on from it just being about an interface, about technology. It's moved into people. It's looked into things that lay behind the journey that people take. And now it's actually looking at the physicality of kind of objects and functionality as well. Product design. Great.
100%. And I think design thinking comes a lot from product design as well. I think we steal from each other all the time. Like, somebody will develop a method in one industry, and that could be digital, and then you use it in a physical space as well, or vice versa. Like, we've learned so much from each other. I think as long as you're interested and motivated to keep learning, you can learn from anywhere and bring that to your work. Because it's ironic that you mentioned the Apple example of the mouse. That was stolen from a printer. They weren't on computers originally. It was taken from a printer. So you can always steal ideas from different areas of the world as well. And this is why, so earlier I spoke to you about the data analysts, and talking about the car example that we did some usability testing on the website, and we wanted to know, like, are people even interested in a test drive from home? And do you know what was really interesting? In the usability, everybody said, yes, I'd love that. That's a great idea. And that was before COVID, so people were quite willing to go to a dealership. But there's a problem with what would you do? And it's asking future-facing questions, because if you ask somebody what they're going to do in the future, they can't predict it. There's no way that you can predict what you will do in the future. So what you actually need to do is test that in a live environment and see what happens. So we create the button, we put it on the website, and it only got used by 0.09%. So you can really start to see how people might tell you something, but they can't always tell you what they're going to do in the future, or they might just be wanting to please you because you're in a situation where, you know, you are in control. And actually putting stuff on the website and testing that and seeing whether that works with the data people, then that you can really start to see, actually, this isn't something we can continue with. This isn't something, they have changed their mind now because the world's changed. But at that moment in time, it was the wrong thing for them to do. So it all kind of hangs off these kind of three principles, the way that I work. And I think everybody kind of wants to work in this way anyway. I don't think that's agnostic to being in digital, but I think doing the right thing is really important. And that's where the user kind of interface comes in, and talking to users and making sure that it works for them. There's doing it efficiently, and that's like making the code really good and making it speedy and looking at all of that. Sorry, no, that's doing it the right way. But doing it efficiently is like, just do enough. So I research all the time. My job is to research all the time, but I only do enough to get me to the next phase. I don't try and do it all in one go. I don't try to say I'm going to know everything in depth, because that's not possible anyway. You do just enough to help you make decisions for the next bit that you need to do, and then you pick up the next one. So I think that's kind of the principles around how I work. But feel free to ask me questions about that because it's kind of a bit waffly, so don't worry. So what does UX mean to me now? Well, it's understanding users and their mindsets that they bring to these problems. So what is the kind of idea that they have? What are the things that they're expecting to see? What different ways do people think about that same problem that they're trying to achieve? And just identifying opportunities to continually improve. Like, my role to me now is about helping people understand where the problems are, what's working, and then say, actually, this is a huge opportunity where we can improve, and actually measure that and use the data to back us up and say, do you know what, we thought this was a great opportunity, but we can prove that too. We can say that we've actually helped you, and we can say that this stuff's actually working for you, and not it just be research has been done, right, let's go make a thing, and everybody forgets about it and it's not important, but really linking that as a full cycle to say, do you know what, yeah, this did work. Oh, no, it didn't. And we need to stop investing in that and start looking at something else. And that is my journey so far.
Wow. Okay, well, thank you very much, Jess. Again, very concise, very precise, and what it, hopefully what the presentation has done is opened up people's thinking about what the world of digital actually is. Yeah, there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes when you're creating digital kind of artifacts and digital products. So we've deliberately left some time for any questions that anybody's got. So please, if you've got any question, now is the time to ask them.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Mark and Jess, for that. It's so interesting hearing your story, Jess. And there's so many routes I think is really important for people to take on, from not knowing what you wanted to do to finding what you wanted to do halfway through your journey. And I think the point you made towards the end there about only doing as much research as you need to do and not overwhelming yourself with trying to do everything all at once, I think, that's a great piece of advice for everyone in life, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we've got a few minutes. We've got about 8 minutes left. I've got some questions here. So, Jess, what's the most interesting project you've worked on so far?
I would say the projects that I love the most are the ones that make me the most uncomfortable, which is ironic, but it's the place that I learn the most. So there was one where I was working with a company who worked in complaints, actually. Their only job was to deal with complaints, which meant that if you think about kind of personas and the traditional personas that you see, which is kind of like, this is Kate, and Kate is 24, and Kate drinks wine at the weekend, and she does this stuff, and so on. That just didn't work for what we needed. So I had to really look at my data that I gathered and what was important to different users around that. And I actually created something that we call now a mindset profile. So I changed the complete way that we looked at users. I changed the artifact that we create as a standard in the industry and just developed something that worked to articulate what we'd learned. And because it was kind of like people only had one job to do, and it was make a complaint, it was like, okay, well, what can we do about people's mindsets around that then? And that's why I talk about it a lot, because people came with it with 3 mindsets. So when they were making a complaint, it was like, well, I want to stick it to the company, and I want to make sure this doesn't happen to anybody else, or I just want my money back kind of a situation. And actually, the only one that we could do with that client was get everybody into thinking, well, I need other people not to suffer in the future. So we acknowledged that these 3 mindsets existed, but really tried to focus all the content and the design to get people to understand that that's not going to happen. You're not going to get your money back. They're not going to get in trouble. But you can make sure this doesn't happen for anybody else in the future. And I think that was really uncomfortable for me, because I was being asked to deliver something that I couldn't do because I didn't have the right information for it, but it pushed me to think about something different. And I think that's where I'm most proud, is trying to articulate something new.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like that. So we've got a few more questions. Is there, so this for you again, Jess, is there something you see online that you would like to work on and make better from a user perspective?
Well, nearly everything. Honestly, if you do get a job in UX, I am telling you, you will hate everything that you ever come across. Nothing ever works in the way that you want to. I think one of the big offenders in the past, but it's starting to get a lot better because of challenger brands, was like online banking. Like, why was that taking 4 days to send somebody money? It was ridiculous. And it was one of them things of like really hard, and you didn't know how to pick the person to pay. And was really kind of frustrating. So like people like Monzo have come along and really challenged that and made the traditional banks that are really slow kind of change the way that they do things. So it's more around that utility stuff. I think if I took it as an offline job, my dream job would be to design the interface of a car and actually what should be on little dials, what's ergonomic, what's the things that should be physical versus what should go on a screen. What does that screen actually work like? Because car interfaces are rubbish. Whenever you try and fill in the postcode on a car that you've hired or something like that, it's so hard.
Yeah, they're really difficult to use. I think mine has always got the clock wrong because I can't actually find where to use it or to change my display. Yeah, they are really quite difficult, aren't they? That's really interesting though to have one offline as well. I really like that when you're talking about UX, that you're doing it within the digital world, but it's very much outside of the digital world as well.
Yeah,
because it's all about people, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mark, I'm going to come to you. So obviously you're from Salford Uni. What are the digital courses that you offer now? And do you need to have studied some sort of digital subject prior to coming to university?
Well, one of the things is that we're doing at the moment, we've got a program that is called Digital Media. Yeah, it's more kind of games focused at this point. But one of the things that we've written over the past year is a brand new suite of programs, which are HND kind of orientated. They're looking at students and they're looking at that kind of connection with industry, a smaller kind of time of study rather than it being 3 years. It's going to be 2 years condensed. Very kind of linked up with industry when we actually wrote those programs. So we're actually looking to get those to recruit for next year. Yeah. So again, what we're doing as an educational institution is that we're looking at our marketplace and what people want and what is relevant to them. And also what we're doing is we're creating bigger connections as well. And I've worked with Beth Hewitt on this. Is one of my colleagues at Salford, is that we're actually working with Salford Business School. Yeah, that connection between the business orientated and the kind of creative kind of element that's required. Our courses are becoming a lot more kind of focused around that kind of employability factor, if that makes sense. Yeah. So yeah,
that's really good because it's really responding to the industry and what people need, which is great. And then I'll end on this final question. What can students do to stand out in their uni applications or kind of job applications? So, to both of you.
I think, well, I'll let Jess answer that one first and then I'll answer it. Yeah, Alan?
So from my perspective, I think what is interesting is portfolios have changed over time massively. And I think what's important is people want it, like if you wanted to be a UX designer and not a UX researcher in kind of my space, people know, like still want to see that end output, but what people care about more, and I think you're listening to this later on today, is like the design thinking, but the process that you went through. Tell us your story. How did you make your decisions? What influenced them? How did you get there? Like what was important to you and how did you go and overcome your challenges that you came across? I think people care about the story, or from my perspective, people care more about your story than they do actually about the finished output. Like obviously we need to know that you can do it, but it's more important to know how you got there.
I think from an educational perspective, that's very, very similar as well. I do a lot of modules as well that are about professional practice. What employers want to be seeing from students is really concise kind of information. When we're looking for students and they're coming for an interview, sure, we want to see a certain amount of skills, but still what makes a student is you can tell when they're being interviewed that they've got that passion. And the key term that Jess has used there is story. There's a narrative behind things. It's not just what you've done, it's what you've learned from what you've actually done. Yeah, the story that surrounds things. So it's not just about being the best kind of person at an execution of something and technical kind of execution. It's about the purpose and the thinking. And I think one of the terms that I use quite a lot when I'm writing feedback to students is you can tell when a student has taken what we call ownership of a brief. They've really kind of not seen it as a stepping stone thing, but they've really got passionate behind it, and they've taken it to an nth degree. So I think, again, I agree totally with Jess there. It's about narrative, yeah, that comes across.
Absolutely, and that's something that we try and get across to all the students that we talk to, and it's something that you've displayed in your own story, Jess. You know, you've learned as you've gone along, and that's directed your route, and that's become part of your story, and that's kind of, you know, that's powerful when for you going for.
Yeah, I think it's the enthusiasm. Like Mark said it then. If you do stuff that you care about, it just comes out of you. Like being excited, wanting to keep learning, wanting to always improve, keep learning. Like it does just come out of you, and people can tell that from a personality. You turn up, and as shy as you think you are, like I was terrified before coming here today. Like honestly, it was something that was like, I was texting Mark like, oh God, I'm so nervous. And you know what? I'm excited about UX. I love talking about it, and you can tell in the way that I talk about things. And that's the thing that's important, is just be enthusiastic about what you do.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we're at the end. So I just want to say a huge thank you, Mark and Jess, for your time, for your presentation, for being so honest about your journey and kind of how you felt coming here today, because I'm sure everyone's sort of been in that position before.
Oh, thank you very much, Becky, and thank you for the audience out there for hopefully getting some benefit from what we've had to offer today. It's been a privilege. It really has. Thank you.
Thank you.